Adaniya Panditji, Excellencies, friends on the dais, and in the audience. Last evening at this time I was releasing a book on Shakespeare. And I said that here a truly universal poet is one whose work cuts across all barriers. Barriers of time, of space, of language, of gender, of caste, of religion, and addresses the whole of humanity. Gurudev Ravindranath Tagore was such a universal person. He was indeed a poet, but I think he was a kavi in the Upanishadic sense. He was a seer. He was the one who saw the beauty that he wrote about. Not merely a cerebral poet, but a poet who wrote from the heart and from the inner strength. What an extraordinary man. In literature, look at his work in literature. He has every single type of writing. He has poems, he has dramas, he has prose, and he has his music. Nitish Babu just spoke about 2,200 songs. Can you imagine that? What a prolific person. And he created a new genre of music, a new style of music, which incorporates classical music, it incorporates Bengali folk music, it incorporates Western music, and it is a creative mix, a creative synthesis and symbiosis of all these styles. His painting, 2,000 paintings. 2,200 songs and 2,000 paintings. I've seen his paintings. I have a theory that all his beauty came out in his poetry and all the darkness and the pain came out in his paintings. Because all his paintings are dark. It's very interesting. I think it's something that should be studied. Because he went through a lot of pain in his life. From the early tragedy in his family onwards. And he was a great romantic. You know, I met Vittoria Ocampo. I met her in Buenos Aires in 1967. She was an elderly, at that time, lady, but still very graceful. So he had a lot of love. He had a lot of romance. He was in love with people. He was in love with the divine. But he had a lot of pain also. And I think that pain expressed itself in the last decade or so of his life through his paintings. Then he had a lot of other things. He was, as has been mentioned, he was an educationist. He had his own system of education. He was a social reformer. And he spoke about all the aspects that we are interested in today. I think this is something which is important to remember. He said at one stage, if they remember me for nothing else, they will remember me for my songs. But I think that is unfortunate because there's more to Tagore than his songs. He talked about nationalism and internationalism. He talked about Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. He was the first global citizen. He talked about multiculturalism. He talked about gender and gender equality and gender inequality. He talked about globalization. He talked about the environment. He talked about all those matters with which we are today engaged. And I think that what we should do, and as Johar has rightly said, apart from the paintings, we should try and rediscover the writings and the thought of Ravindranath Tagore. For example, his Hibbert lectures, and then his last lecture, The Crisis of Civilization, I think should be read again because our civilization is again in crisis. Even today we find that old structures are collapsing and new are struggling to be born, and we find ourselves precariously poised between a disappearing past and an indeterminate future. At a time like this, it is the thoughts of these great people. And let me say, there were three great people at that time in India who were in touch with each other. Ravindranath Tagore in Calcutta, Sri Aurobindo in Pondicherry. And Ravindranath, as you know, wrote a poem, Ravindranath or Aurobindo bows to thee. And Mahatma Gandhi in Gujarat. So in the three corners of India, you had these three colossi. And look at their works collected works of these three people. I mean, Gandhi's works is 100 volumes. Or Sri Aurobindo's works is 50 or 60 volumes. Ravindranath Tagore, our Indian geniuses are nothing if not prolix. And we write and we write and we write and we speak, which is extraordinary. What is the relationship between these three people? Somebody should do a seminar on that. One of our universities. Tagore, Gandhi and Aurobindo. It would be a fascinating study. His life is beautifully summed up by Krishna Kripalani, who's written a beautiful book on him. And Krishna says in his biography of Tagore, a way of living that is manly without being brutal, sensitive without being sentimental, rational without being materialistic, religious without being fanatic, and patriotic without being chauvinistic. I think this is a beautiful definition of a truly great, a universal person. A man who has left his vibrations of his songs and his poetry are still there. And this is the opportunity for us to recapture something of the greatness of this man, to take advantage of his multifaceted and pluralistic genius, and to see what we can learn from them. His great poem, which we all read as students, I think give us a map. It says where the mind is without fear, abhaya. Abhaya is the first thing the Gita writes about. Shiva is Nikhil Abhayaharam. As long as we have fear in our hearts, we can never grow spiritually. And the head is held high. We can't hold our heads high unless we are fearless. Where knowledge is free, we have the Right to Information Act, so I suppose knowledge is going to become free now. Where the world has not been broken up into fragments by narrow domestic walls. We were supposed to move towards a global society, but we find that still the world is fragmented and fractured. And even as I speak to you today, there are conflicts going on in the name of religion, in the name of nationalism. Where words come out from the depths of truth. Now that is an important thing. We must first of all know the truth before we can have the words from there. Not all the lies and the falsehoods and the corruptions that we find around us today. Where is the spirit of India gone? Where is the voice of the Upanishadic seers? Where is the voice of a Jalaluddin Rumi? Or all these great poets that we've had out of Guru Nanak. We've got to recapture that voice again. Those are words that came out from the depth of truth. Amir Khusro. Where tireless striving stretches its arms towards perfection. The Karma Yoga. We've got to keep working. Jawaharlal Nehru, you remember, said, Aram haram hai. You can't just sit back. You have to continue to work in whatever field you're working. Where the clear stream of reason has not lost its way into the dreary desert sand of dead habit. You watch Parliament on television, so I'll not comment on that. Where the mind is led forward by thee into ever-widening thought and action. Not only thought. We have great thought in India. What about the action? Our actions never live up to our thoughts. Our thoughts are great. Our actions are very seldom great. So where the mind is led forward by thee into ever-widening thought and action into that heaven of freedom, my Father, let my country awake. So my hope is that these celebrations that we are having will enable us to move towards that heaven of freedom that Gurudev had envisaged for us as a result of his extraordinary genius. I pay my homage to his memory.